Fill it just random, but if you can filter out the chickens, please do.
At Start Experience.
Welcome back to the Benchmarkers Rugby Show. My name is Kumbi. I am a data scientist slash rugby fan.
Yeah, and I am Nyasha. I'm a data scientist as well. Also a rugby fan. And I'm the AI and stats guy. I bring you the stats, the analysis. Yeah. And Kumbi, you're our expert. And like we said, we think we make the perfect pairing. And thank you for being on this journey with us. And we hope we keep providing you guys with value and entertainment.
Right. Yeah. Yes, definitely. So, obviously, we've got more Rugby World Cup excitement. This is the final week of the group stages, which means, there's a lot of things that are going to be going on, a lot of games to look at. And we decided this week that our game of the week, the game that we're going to be focusing on, is going to be Fiji versus Portugal, right? So that's going to be a Group C matchup. So just to start us off, right? So obviously, Fiji they've got a chance to qualify. I think they've qualified in 2007, but I think they haven't qualified since then for the quarterfinals. So it's a massive game. It's a massive weekend against Portugal, right? But Portugal have been playing quite well. I think Group C has been quite evenly matched as far as performances go. I think any team in that group can beat any of the other four, really. So Portugal have a really good chance not only to get a win at this World Cup, but just to break some Fijian hearts. So that's the game that we're going to be focusing on. So before we go there, we're just going to briefly look at the scenario, right? So just the permutation, just a couple of permutations to see, what would the outcomes of the game, what effects would they have, and who qualifies, right? So, right, in this group, obviously we've got Wales. Wales on 14 points. They've already qualified because Australia, they've already finished all their games. Georgia and Portugal at the bottom of the table, they're on 2 and 3 points. The next best team is on 10, so which means those guys don't qualify at all. So it's worth noting that the top 3 teams qualify automatically to the next World Cup. So which means Georgia and Portugal are going to need to go through qualifications again, unfortunately. But hopefully they're going to make it because they look quite promising, right? So that means Fiji has a chance to qualify, right? So which means they're on 10 points. Australia's on 11. Australia aren't playing this weekend, all right? The difference between them is going to be 1 point, which means Fiji need 1 point to level on points with Australia. And the rule is if you're level on points, whoever won that matchup goes through. So we know that Fiji beat Australia, so which means if Fiji only get 1 point from this game, they qualify, right? So basically that's what Fiji need to do, right? So if they go, obviously there's the other situations where if they win by 5 points, they go to 15. If the Wales don't get a single point, they stay on 14. So it means Fiji goes through as top seed and whatnot, but we're focusing on Fiji needing to get 1 point out of this particular game, right? Yeah. So that's essentially all you need to know. That's basically like a quick rundown of what needs to happen for the weekend. Yeah. So we're just going to jump straight into the numbers, right? So I think Nyasha, you can take us away.
Yeah, of course. So I guess before we get into the numbers, right? This is just we're just comparing just a few KPIs. Of course, we will get into a broader story and more context, after we look at this. But this is more of a leaderboard, just seeing how they rank and a few KPIs within their group.
Yeah.
Right. So just getting straight into it. Just starting off with turnovers conceded, right? Where we have Fiji conceding the most turnovers, right? Australia, Georgia, and Wales conceding the least, right? Clearly that plays a huge role in them doing so well. Rux 1, we have Fiji at the top with 309 Rux 1. But the way Fiji's playing, I mean, those guys are physical, they're dominant, very disciplined, right? And then comparing directly to Portugal with 238 Rux 1. So obviously. In their matchup, Fiji will be looking to win more runs. Penalties conceded. So, like I said, Fiji. Exactly right. So penalties conceded. Like I said, Fiji is very, very disciplined. Right, they've conceded the fewest penalties. Australia's conceded the most, which, again, a little bit of a shock. But with the state of the team, I guess not much of a surprise.
Yeah.
And then Portugal conceding the second least with 28 penalties conceded. Defenders beaten,
Right.
Fiji, again, the top 86 defenders beaten. Portugal all the way down at 66. Offloads Fiji on top again. Jeez, how was Fiji actually almost won that game against Wales? Realistically, they
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
they shouldn't really be on top. But with offloads, Fiji at the top, and followed by Australia, Georgia, and then funny enough, Wales at the bottom, but Portugal 24.
Way at the bottom. Yeah, that's surprising. Yeah.
Yeah, and then now clean breaks, right, where we have Portugal at the top and Fiji, Portugal at the top with 23 and Fiji at the bottom with 15. But of course, just like with any stats, it comes down to play styles as well, but the good thing about this analysis is all these teams have played each other except for Fiji. Fiji has played the exact same team that Portugal has played, so the comparisons are a lot easier to make. Yeah, so these just looking at a couple of KPIs. Kumbi, what story does this paint, especially for Portugal's chances against Fiji?
Right. I think, like you said, these are just a few of the KPIs and the stats that we look at, right? Or that we're looking at. We're going to look into a few more, not exhaustive, but we're going to look at a few more stats just now.
Yeah.
But I think it just gives an overall picture of their styles of play, right? And what Fiji's strengths are. So it looks like here, obviously with Fiji, they are a team that likes to run the ball, right? So they've got a lot more defenders beaten, a lot more rucks won. So they want to play that fast ball, which really isn't surprising, right?
Yeah.
They want to play an offloading game. And I think that's where, if obviously we as Fiji, we know what Fiji is good at, right? If I'm Portugal, that's exactly where we want to make sure that we hit them, right? So if you look at the game against Georgia, right, the thing that Georgia did right was they stifled their attack, right? So they wanted to stop that kind of game, that expansive play and whatnot. So that's basically what Portugal need to do, right? And then you also have other stats like, there's certain things that Fiji are doing right, like the penalties. They're winning penalties, but at the right time. But they're also not conceding as many penalties as the other teams that they're facing, and so on. So yes, so it basically shows their strengths. It shows what Portugal need to get right. So I think, but obviously we don't really get the full picture unless we see a game by game. The game by game stats. So we're just going to focus on one game. So I think maybe you can just introduce those game wise stats. Yeah.
Yeah, so right, so here we're just looking at a post-game report that we generate, by just looking at the stats. We're not going to go into the full report. We're just going to look at a few key things. Some set piece things, attack and defense, right? And when you're looking at the game, their games against Portugal, both of them. Against Georgia. So Portugal against Georgia and Fiji against Georgia, and to see how they compare. Right, because for Fiji and Georgia, those are similarly tiered countries, right? So that's it's a pretty good comparison, right? Now it's just right. So now just starting off with the lineouts, right? Just a set piece. Portugal against Georgia, right? 16 lineouts and 88% success, and Fiji against Georgia, also 16 lineouts with 69% success, right? So clearly, Portugal, as far as against Georgia, as far as the same opposition, they did better. Actually, they did much better.
Much better. Yeah.
Does that come as a shock to you?
No, not really. I think Portugal, I think this is the one thing that I'll be looking at, right? Because I think Portugal has a line out that I think can disrupt Fiji's expansive game, the expansive game that was reflected in the stats we just talked about. However, I think, so obviously that's the one thing that they could do right to take the game away from Fiji. But I think it's all about when they win the lineouts, right? So so I think the one thing that separates tier 2 countries, unfortunately, because they lack exposure to, consistent fixtures with tier 1 countries. So what then happens is that sometimes the finesse is just off, right? So they just get things. So maybe they might be doing right the whole game, but like they just get it wrong at the worst time, right? So in this case, even though Portugal has a great line out, so for example against Australia, right, which obviously we're looking at for Georgia here, but just to give a fuller picture of other games that they've played against Australia, they had a really good line out. I think it was 87 or 88% success.
Yeah.
But they just got, when they were on Australia's 5 meter line, maybe they knock the ball on, or they lose their own line out and so on. So I think it's just getting that line out wrong at the wrong time. Whereas at Fiji, even though they had a 69% in the last game with Georgia, their line out was 69%. It's those two line outs at the beginning of the second half that led to their getting momentum back. Wayatha scoring in the second half as well. So it's all about the timing, right? So it's all good and well getting these things right, but it's when do you get those things right? So I think that's where Portugal just need to make sure that they get they sort that out this weekend.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the set piece, right?
Yeah. So now just getting into attack here, we're just going to look at rucks won and defenders beaten. Right? Starting off with Georgia against Portugal, right? So Georgia had 82 rucks won against Portugal had 82 rucks won against Georgia, and Fiji had 106, right? So that's quite the difference. And then as far as defenders beaten, as you saw from the leaderboards, Portugal's pretty good at that. Portugal had 23 defenders beaten to Fiji's 17 against Georgia, right? So a clear contrast there between the two KPIs. But yeah, Kumbi,
Yeah, I think obviously we've mentioned this before. The fact that I think we know how Fiji is going to play.
Yeah.
But because obviously the question is how can Portugal get this win for this weekend, and I think it's all about stopping these the ball runners. You've got Tui Silva, you've got Randrandra on the wing, right? So make sure that you just don't give them enough space. Take a leaf. What do they say in English? Take a leaf out of Georgia's page. Is that? I don't know if I'm getting that correct.
You know what? I back you.
It sounds right.
It feels right. It feels right. Right.
Right. Exactly. Right.
Yeah,
so basically, take what Georgia did right in their game, right, and then stifle the attack. And I think once, because Fiji you don't usually have other things to go back to, like kicking and all that stuff. So I think once they get this right, I think Portugal might have a chance here. So yeah.
Okay, and then going straight into defense. Right here, we'll just look at tackle success and turnovers won. Right. Now, so looking at tackle success against looking at it for Portugal, they had 155 tackles and 86% tackle success rate, and then Fiji had 136 tackles and 79 tackle success, right? So that's fewer tackles, fewer tackles and a lower percentage. But of course, fewer tackles probably often means that it's very possible you had most of the ball. So
exactly.
You can't be making tackles if you have the possession, right? But then once the numbers get in the high hundreds, we can compare the percentages. They become more meaningful, right? The variance is lower. So just looking at a higher tackle success rate for Portugal relative to Fiji against Georgia, that does paint a picture of better tackling for Portugal. And so just starting off with that, your thoughts on the defensive play.
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant theme that they just need to make sure that the defense is right. They have fallen from tackles in other games. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the other two games they were under 80%, right? So you can't have that against big ball carrying Fijians. You have to make sure that you get that right. You don't miss tackles and critical points. So even if you look at for example Fiji, I mean really. Like the one thing that we'll see is that it's not just about getting. So I know I said that before, but it's not just about getting it right. You have to get it right at the right time, right? So you can't afford to lose, to miss tackles when you're down 14 men, like what happened against Australia, and then score 3 tries. I mean, concede 3 tries in 10 minutes. That can't happen, And on the other side as well, some of the things that Fiji is doing right. So I think Fiji struggled a little bit in some cases, in some parts of the game against Wales, especially against Wales, and then at some points against Australia, defensively.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that Fiji is doing right is that they're getting good turnovers at the right time, right? So it's all about the timing, right? It's not just about, well, if I get a turnover in the first, or like 5 turnovers in the first 5 minutes, and then don't get another one in the rest of the game, who's that going to help, right? So it's all about making sure that the timing, I think Botia is doing quite well at getting critical turnovers at the right time. So yeah, I think that's going to be the difference between these two teams, right? The two have strengths and weaknesses. It's all about when your weaknesses and your strengths appear, do they appear at the right time or at the wrong time?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that essentially that's the analysis.
Yeah, and I guess one that I'll just add on. I'm just looking at this because Fiji got 2 yellow cards against Georgia, and Portugal got 1, right?
Correct.
And we've seen the impact that playing with 13 or 14 men can have, and I do think in a game like this, it will play a significantly bigger role. Right. So Fiji, even though generally they're actually quite disciplined, they got more yellow cards against Georgia. So that's something they definitely do need to to look into. But then they did concede less penalties against. They conceded 8 penalties against Georgia compared to Portugal's 11, right? And in a game like this, this is about winning, right? They just need 1 point, right? So if they're conceding penalties,
all they need is 1 point.
Exactly. So if they start kicking, applying their scoreboard pressure, the game becomes easy for them, right? But yeah, so on our side, this is the analysis. And we hope you find it valuable.
So just to finish off, I think just to add like just a little bit of what I hope will happen. I'm hoping, obviously I want Fiji to qualify. I think that will be. I've been very vocal about my support for Fiji. I'm really rooting for them. But I think the perfect scenario for me, if Fiji can just win this game, but not by a lot, right? Just make sure that Fiji gets. I mean, if Portugal can win the game, but Fiji still gets like a bonus point out of the win. So they just go to 11, they still qualify, but Portugal still get their win. I think that's the perfect scenario for me. I think it's a win-win situation. So I'm really hoping that will happen. But we'll see. I think we're just hoping for some good rugby.
Yeah, certainly. So clearly no one's in Australia's camp. As Eddie Jones would say, don't be so negative, mate. Don't be so negative. But they're definitely going through it. But that's the analysis. And one thing I do just want to add, thank you for 200 subscribers.
Absolutely.
Right, they're flying in faster than we expected. Honestly, at this stage, I'd have been happy with 20. Right, because I only know 10 people, so the extra 10 would have been from the algorithm. But thank you, and thank you for the comments. We do read them. I've seen people have an appetite for more in-depth analysis, so we will be providing more in-depth analysis. Clearly, we have attracted the people that like numbers and the people that like rugby. So
the algorithm works.
Yes. Yeah. So don't you asked for heavy statistical analysis. We'll be presenting that. We're working on it, and when it starts, don't complain. I'd get your math caps on. But that's it from me, Ano Kumbi.
No, absolutely, yeah. Just thank you for watching. Don't forget to like the video, comment if you have anything to say. We'll appreciate it, and just subscribe to the channel. For me, that's everything for me. All right, we'll see you guys in the next video.
Yeah.
All right, cheers.
Okay, cheers.
Righto. That was long.
It was long. It didn't feel long though.